Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the deputy editor of the Spectator, Freddy Gray, and the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface, with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to both of you. So to the front pages then, let's start with the Financial Times, which is leading with criticisms of the Bank of England, who have come under fire since the value of the pound hit its lowest level since 1971. Fury at the City Slickers betting against UK PLC, reads the front of the Daily Mail, which also leads with the story. The Metro looks at the value of the pound, their headline, the pound quatanks. Honey, I shrunk the quids, reads the front of the Daily Star. Out of control is the headline on the front of the Daily Mirror as the Conservative Party's mini-budget continues to be under scrutiny. The Daily Express looks at the response to criticisms of the mini-budget with the headline, "Don't panic, we've got a plan to cut debt." The Eye also running with that story, their headline, "New mortgages blocked amid UK market turmoil." And the front of the Telegraph also leading with the headline, "Spooked lenders ditch new mortgages in pound chaos." Prime Minister Liz Truss's economic strategy is questioned on the front page of The Guardian. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out those front pages while you watch our guests. So let's return to them. Joined tonight, as I said, by the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddy Gray, and the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface. Freddie, that's not exactly a set of headlines any Chancellor or Prime Minister wants to wake up to come Tuesday morning. How do we get ourselves out of this?
Well, it's a news horror, a news cycle horror for this government. And as that FT front page suggests, the concern is that the moves by the Treasury tonight and the Bank of England to calm the markets haven't appeared to have worked very well. I think the FT's being, and actually other papers too, are being slightly too apocalyptic about it, in that it's obviously a very, very bad day for Britain on the global exchanges. However, you know, if you look at the beginning of the day, it was the pound was 1.07 to the dollar. At the end of the day, it's 1.08. So that's not a massive slide, but of course the gilt yields are terrifyingly high, and that's the real story, and that's the thing the government wants to try and get under control and seem to be struggling with. And what's very obvious is that the government did not anticipate this reaction at all. I think they anticipated some market volatility, but nothing like this.
Susie, reminding everybody that Kwasi Kwarteng had told the FT on Friday that he would set out a medium-term fiscal plan in the new year. That's now been brought forward to November the 23rd. The Office for Budget Responsibility announcing an independent set of forecasts on the same day. That's still 2 months away, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's quite astonishing that, you know, a Chancellor who's just stood up and made a massive fiscal intervention has to immediately find some way to sort it out within 2 months of it. And even so, I think that's not going to be early enough. Now, this is the first time that I can recall that any government, but certainly the Conservatives, being in this much economic chaos since the 1990s, since Black Wednesday. And I can't remember at all, in history even, any Prime Minister who has caused this much trouble within a couple of months taking over. And I can't remember any Chancellor who, just with a 20-minute non-budget budget speech, has managed to do this to the markets. Usually, you know, when there's a huge problem financially, it's because there are external factors. There are other things happening in the global markets, and our Chancellor has just reacted badly. What's happened here is entirely and 100% dependent upon the decisions that were made in Downing Street by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. It's not being impacted to a large extent by anything else. It's just down to these guys. And they can't blame it on someone else. They've talked about this being jitters in the city, but actually this is because they have got billions and billions of unfunded borrowing on the never, never, pretty much. This is exactly the kind of thing the Conservatives are warning us about for years that you get with Jeremy Corbyn, if you remember. And because they didn't allow an assessment by the Office of Budget Responsibility. And now today, even though the Bank of England has tried to issue some reassurance, because they didn't immediately raise interest rates, that made the markets even more jittery. And it's going to cost all our prices to go up. It's as simple as that. And they can't blame anybody else. This is because they wanted to appeal to a very narrow electorate, the Conservative Party membership, and they wanted to offer them tax cuts on the minute they got in. They gave them that, but that's the price you pay for appealing to a very narrow, fairly selfish minority in order to get power.
The Metro, the pound quatanks, and as Susie was saying there, Freddie, the pound falls, imports are expensive. We import lots from America, for example, and some things like metals, that they're in the US dollar currency. They suggest, or they are quoting a YouGov poll for the Times, which gives Labour a 17-point lead over the Tories, the biggest recorded so far. Should we listen to someone like Andy Burnham, who said that this was, economically reckless, socially reckless, and politically reckless?
Well, the Tory party have scored an unbelievable own goal as Labour are having their conference. If Labour cannot exploit this for the most political points possible, then they really need to get out of politics forever. It looks like they will. The polls suggest. I think YouGov, it's the highest ever lead for Labour since they've been doing that poll. Is that right? I would also like to point out that the Stars pun on the pound is a lot better than the pound quatanks, which I think is terrible as a pun. But Honey, I Shrunk the Quids from the Stars is a lot stronger.
Yeah, to be fair, the Star made everybody guffaw here, to be honest with you, but there we are. The Express, though, coming out in support. Don't panic, we have got a plan to cut debt. Is that the one that we're going to hear on November the 23rd? The Daily Telegraph, not so happy. Spooked lenders ditch new mortgages in pound chaos, but they quote the statement from the Bank of England and the Treasury. The Monetary Policy Committee will not hesitate to change interest rates by as much as needed to return inflation to the 2% target. What are we looking at then now, Susie? 6%? Is that the suggestion?
Well, that's the suggestion, 6.5%. And although that's about 3 times interest rates at the moment, although it may seem like a small amount, perhaps still to some people, if you don't have a mortgage, 6% doesn't seem like enormous. That's still halfway to the really crippling interest rates we had in the early 90s of 14, 15% after Black Wednesday. And so it causes a huge correction to house prices, to the availability of borrowing. One of the things they've done by devaluing the pound in this way, unintentionally, is they've increased the cost of government borrowing. So just at the time that they borrowed tens of billions more, they've managed also to increase the cost of doing it. And it was already at a high for having to borrow that money to start with. So it's a double kind of incompetence. But there is a fantastic quote actually in the front of the FT from the chief economist at the Bank of Singapore, who says, it looks like we're headed for a spiral that we usually see in emerging markets, where policymakers struggle to reassert credibility. And I think that says absolutely everything about where we are. What's astonishing is that this is a government that's managed to do this 2.5 weeks after they took over. What were they thinking?
Well, the Daily Mail, in its own way, being supportive, blaming city slickers betting against the UK PLC, speculators profiting from a fall in the pound. Do you blame them, Freddie, or is there something specific that happened on Friday that caused this? Because a lot of it was factored in. The business help on energy prices, we heard about already. We knew that national insurance would be ditched, that increase, that corporation tax, the future rise would be ditched. So what was it specifically that spooked the markets, do you think, on Friday?
I think actually it's the combination of the energy plan, the sheer cost of that, and then no clear way in which the government put out that they were going to pay for this huge increase in spending. There is actually some good news. This is a tiny bit of good news for Britain, and I think everybody should be relieved a bit by this, which is gas prices going down quite dramatically today. So let's hope that continues, because that will make the burden of the energy cap much lower. I think, however, on the general reaction to the mini budget, there's no the government just didn't see this happening. They didn't anticipate it, and I think that's rather short-sighted of them. And it also suggests, I mean, I do think in terms of, you can't blame speculators.
Freddie, Rishi Sunak is trending on Twitter right now because everybody pointed out numerous times throughout that campaign, the fairy tale economics, the dive in the pound, the gilt increase, etc. You know, how they weren't aware of the warnings, beggars belief, does it not?
No, it does, and I mean, I don't think you can blame speculators for speculating and so on. I do think there does tend to be a bit more, as somebody on Bloomberg to put it today. We need rather more numbers and fewer adjectives. I think there's a lot of apocalyptic talk about this sterling crisis, and it is a crisis, but I don't think we're quite at Britain default levels yet, which is what you would get if you read quite a few of the newspapers today.
Well, crisis is the word The Guardian is using on its front cover. Sterling crisis deepens as Truss's strategy unravels. But it's the right-hand column you wanted to pick out, Susie, up in Liverpool as you are for the Labour Party conference, which is the words of Keir Starmer. He will attempt to take on the mantle of Tony Blair. Tell us more.
Yeah, he's going to say basically that the Labour Party now is the party of fiscal responsibility. And he's going to say that the Conservatives have lost control of the economy. They've crashed it. It's over. And they've done it all just for the sake of some tax cuts for a few thousand super rich people. And you've got to bear in mind the tax cuts that was penciled for coming in. Who knows if they're actually still coming now or not? If we're even going to have a government by Christmas, I don't know. But that was for people earning over £150,000 a year. It affected maybe 500,000 people, and you've got to also ask yourself how many people earning more than £150,000 take that money as PAYE and therefore pay the income tax. How many people earning that kind of money spend every single penny of it in the UK? How many of them actually save their money so they never spend it at all? How many of them actually manage to find a way to shelter some of that money so it's away from the tax man? The idea that letting those people have more money and it would all trickle down upon us only works if everybody in the economy is in a bubble and no one moves their money offshore and no one buys things from Amazon and nobody goes to buy a coffee from Starbucks and there are no multinationals that move their profits offshore and get them taxed offshore. There is no such thing as trickle-down economics. It's been proved wrong again and again and again. And the fact that Freddie was saying that they were sort of short-sighted and didn't see what was coming. I would dispute that. I think they have seen exactly what was coming. Reuters reported earlier this week that OD Asset Management, which is a big hedge fund, which Kwasi Kwarteng used to work for, soared in value by 145% after shorting the pound. Now, Kwasi, I'm sure, didn't give me any information about what he was doing, but I'm sure also that OD Asset Management knew the kind of thing he was going to go and do once he got into some kind of position of power. And they make a very good guess. And it was very well signposted, as you said, Anna, exactly the kind of cuts that were going to come in. They knew what was coming. They knew it was going to go bad. Okay. They shorted the pound. They made it killing. And now that government cannot possibly turn around and blame, as they have done on the front page of the Daily Mail, the city slickers for talking the pound down, because the reason the pound's down is because what the government did.
OK, Susie and Freddie, stay there. Lots more to talk about, including this, why anyone needing a new mortgage could face problems as a result of the market turmoil. Sure you're aware. Back with that in just a moment. You're watching the press preview. With me once again, the Deputy Editor of The Spectator, Freddy Gray, and the Daily Mirror columnist, Susie Boniface. Welcome back to both of you. We return to a theme, I'm afraid, but new mortgages for certain companies blocked earlier today, Freddie, because of this market turmoil. The Eye listing Halifax, Virgin Money and Skipton had stopped offering new home loans. What are they waiting to do? See how it all settles?
Well, I think this is going to be the big financial story of the next few months, which is what is going to happen if, as the market anticipates, rates go up. Some people anticipating to go up as high as sort of 7%. That will cause enormous damage and harm to the British economy. It could precipitate a housing crash. Some people think that Liz Truss is quite sanguine about a sharp dip in housing prices. That's a point of debate. But the issue of mortgages is something that could really cripple a large chunk of the British population. And the difference between the 1970s and now is that people have much bigger mortgages, and that their payments will be enormous and, in fact, unpayable. So there'll be large amounts of defaulting and possibly a huge housing crisis.
Just when you want to be cheered up, let's go on to the Times.
Doesn't get any cheerier.
I know. Again, the Times quoting the bank vowing to step in after a day of turmoil, reminding us that Andrew Bailey, Bank of England governor, ruled out an emergency rate rise, said he will not hesitate to change interest rates. And your paper as well, Susie, out of control, pound at record lows, new interest rate fear, and millions of households brace for more price hikes. So that's the nuts and bolts of it for people now, isn't it?
Exactly. And, one of the currencies that pound fell against today was the Russian ruble, the currency of a country which is currently undertaking and losing an industrialized war and issuing nuclear threats and raping and kidnapping women and children as young as 4. And their currency did better than ours today.
I don't know what to say, quite frankly, at the moment, but there we are. It's
there isn't anything to say, is there?
The pound didn't do much against the euro today.
It's one of those sets of front pages, isn't it? Definitely. Freddie, Susie, thank you both very much indeed.